Hey, I'm ZSH and today we're building a realistic jungle in an aviary for everyone's favourite nightmare fuel, Dimorphodon. This is the first aviary that we've built in the park, so before we start building, we need to head over to the Science Centre and do some research. We'll research the aviaries and the aviary viewing galleries, so we've got somewhere to keep our Dimorphodons, and as a Jurassic animal, they'll be going into our Jurassic area. We have 3 dinosaurs in here at the moment, Stegosaurus, Compsognathus, and Allosaurus, and now it's time for the Dimorphodon. This is where we're going to be building the aviary. We raised this area up into a little hill when we first started on the area to make sure the aviary was visible, and now we're going to extend that hill to cover about half of this side of the map. So we get a natural looking change in the terrain elevation from the aviary onwards. So the path winds up to the aviary, and we've also got raised ground to build the enormous herbivore habitats that we're going to have in this area of the park as well. I have some very specific plans for the aviary, but before we get to that, we need to give our guests a way to get there. So we're going to run a path up to here, and then we're going to place an aviary in and make sure it's lined up so that the entrance, i.e. the viewing gallery, will be perfectly aligned with this path here. There we go, already looking nice nestled amongst those trees there. And what I want to make sure is that this aviary is visible from the entrance to the Jurassic area, which as you can see at the moment it isn't. So we're going to move some of the trees that are in the eye line from the entrance gates to the aviary. This one next to the Compy habitat was manually placed so we can move that easily enough and replace them with some bushes and some smaller trees to make sure that we end up with an effect like this, where the aviary is clearly visible as you walk into the area. Then we're going to create a circular path that goes round the aviary so that when guests get here, as well as going into the aviary, they can go either side of the aviary to get into the next bits of the park, and we'll also join it up with the path coming past the river from the Allosaurus habitat. We'll replace the aviary to make sure it's exactly in the centre of that circle, add a viewing gallery on the front, a hatchery on the side. We'll add some basic terrain and water inside it, and then we're going to go and grab some Dimorphodon DNA. And once we can make Dimorphodon, then I'll tell you what the plans for the aviary are. So when I was researching this, I discovered that despite soaring around in the air and diving into the water to eat fish in the game, in reality, scientists think that Dimorphodon was probably not a particularly strong flyer, much more comfortable on the ground, and predominantly ate invertebrates and maybe small vertebrates as well. They were discovered by the absolute legend Mary Anning on the coast of England back in the 1800s. And they probably lived in the warm jungles that covered Britain at that time. So what I want to do is create a jungle inside this dome and create what is effectively a false floor of jungle to completely cover up all the water and hide the fish feeder. So it looks like our Dimorphodons are living a much more terrestrial life in a jungle rather than soaring around in the air all the time. This is stage 1 of that plan. We're creating some little patches of jungle which we can then move into the aviary to start to transform it. So just using loads of different plants that seem suitable, mainly ferns and bracken and things like that. This king fern is one of my favourites, really glad to see that brought across from Planet Zoo. We'll add a few rocks in as well for interest. We've got a circular patch which is going to go round the sides of the aviary, and then square patches which are going to make up the majority of the floor. And once we've got those to our liking, and these are looking pretty nice now, we can start moving them into the aviary. The first thing I want to do is get rid of the big pool of water in the middle. This is about as small as we can get the water and still fit a fish feeder in there. Because we're in standard mode here, we can't just not feed the Dimorphodons, they will starve. So we need to feed them. We're basically just going to cover up all the water. So when we're finished, this is going to look like a forest floor. We'll make a little variant of one of these panels just so they don't all look the same. And then we'll start copying both of them around to completely cover up the water. And because we've got those soil panels on the bottom, that's just going to make this area look like the floor of the aviary, and you won't even know there's water there. We've got collision turned on these so that the Dimorphodons won't dive through them, and we've still got that fish feeder in the middle so they'll still be able to eat, but we can make a much more appropriate environment for them. I gotta say, it's a bit disappointing that every flying reptile in the game is a soaring fish eater, because I suspect the more research I do on this, the more we're going to find that not many of them actually were. But we will cross those bridges when we come to them. This certainly isn't going to be the last aviary in this park. We'll cover up the fish feeder with some simple wooden planks, just so it doesn't stick out so much. And regardless of how much extra work we're having to do to make this realistic, I am really excited to see how this one is going to turn out. If we can get it right, it's really going to feel like the kind of jungle dome that you see in really top-end zoos, rather than a pretty barren aviary like you'd often see in this game. If you're enjoying this, by the way, don't forget to hit the like button, and if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you can see the rest of the series. Once we've got those wooden planks in around the fish feeder, we'll add some final detailing in with a few more bushes and shrubs. And there we go, this little patch of jungle is starting to look really good. And we can move on to the rest of the aviary. So we're going to use the circular panels that we created to start dressing up the sides of the aviary. And we use random rotation to make sure they don't all look the same. And once we've got a few of these in, we're going to move them up so we get different heights in here. There we go, I think that looks good. With one curve done, we can just copy that around the rest of the walls of the aviary really easily and fill all of that in. Really important to have some height variation in your builds. It just makes them so much more interesting, especially in an aviary, because there's a big old chunk of concrete on each of those walls, which is pretty boring looking and certainly not very natural looking. So we want to cover up as much of that as possible, and we'll be covering even more of it up later. Once we've got the side plants in, then we're going to start filling in with rock work underneath it. So we end up with a kind of shelf on the edge of the aviary. Looks really nice and joins the forest floor onto the rest of the aviary. I think this might be the first time we've ever used the Jurassic World aviary in a build on this channel. I always use either the Jurassic Park aviary for those classic vibes or the Malta aviary because I love the rusted metal on it. But for this build, because we want a hot jungle, and we're in the Pacific Northwest here, we're going to need it to be completely enclosed, and the Jurassic World aviary is more of an enclosed dome than a traditional aviary, so it works really nicely for this. Keep it nice and warm in here. Just one more rock to place. There we go, and that's the sides of the aviary filled in. And now we can just go in and make some little adjustments to the jungle panels to make sure we don't have any soil sticking out. And that's the sides of the aviary complete and looking good. And we can move on to the final stage of the undergrowth, which is to fill in all the gaps between the sides and the water. And there we go. We got a jungle floor filled in to the aviary. And now we can move on to the trees. So we're going to use a mixture of mainly the kapok trees and the Brazil nut trees and a few others to get a very tropical jungle vibe in here. And we're also going to scatter loads of logs and things like that on the floor for interest. The dead banana plants and some more dead trees that look like they've fallen down onto the sides of the aviary. Pretty much anything we can think of that would be in a jungle to get this as busy and vibrant as possible. And then we're going to add a perch point in right next to the guest viewing to make sure there's a really good view of the Dimorphodon for the guests. And we'll cover that in ivy. Just place a few pieces on, one here, one just here, and one more here, and then we can copy it and rotate it round. I also want some vines in here. Sadly, we don't have any vines in Jurassic World Evolution 3, so we're going to make our own. This is a technique we've used a lot in Planet Zoo, and happily it works just as well in Jurassic World Evolution 3. What we're going to do is take one of the small straight rope pieces, recolor it so it looks like a vine, and then copy it and line it up so it moves from that first tree to this tree. Once we've got it in the right direction, we just copy it, move it down to the end, and then rotate it upwards ever so slightly, and repeat that until we get them all the way to the other tree. And what we end up with is a natural looking curve that goes from one tree to the other and looks just like a vine. Just one more piece to place here and one final rotation, and we've got it joined up to that tree. Looking good. We'll copy those, have quite a few of those. They just add another level to the build and make this jungle even more busy like we want it to be. We'll add some vines to the walls, a roof to the viewing gallery, and then we've got just one more thing to add and the inside of our jungle will be complete. I thought it'd be fun to have some sort of water misting system with water coming down into the aviary. So we're going to take this fountain, turn it upside down, line it up with the roof of the aviary, recolor it so it fits in nicely, and we'll see some more of that in the end cinematics. But there we go, that's the inside of our aviary looking good. Looking at it from the outside, I feel like we could just do with one massive tree in the middle to act as a centerpiece. So we'll place one in there, and now we can move on to the inside. Before we do that though, we're heading over to the Allosaurus habitat because these two have nested already, and we're about to see some baby Allosaurus. First time that I've seen them. Here they are. They are really nasty looking. These babies look positively evil, like naughty little crocodiles. They look like they're going to cause a huge amount of mischief immediately. Right, let's get back to the aviary and start building the outside. For the outside of the building, I want to pay tribute to the cliffs of the Dorset coast here in England, where Mary Anning first discovered the Dimorphodon back in 1828. So we're going to use these Mediterranean rocks to create a cliff face that goes all the way around the aviary and is incorporated into the entrance as well. And once we've got the beginnings of the rock face in, what we're going to do is create a circle of plants and wall that is going to go round the aviary. We'll use the circle trick to do this, and that's going to create a seamless border of wall, then soil, then plants, which we can then add other plants to stop it from looking repetitive. So we'll copy this piece, spin it round, place it down on the opposite side of the dome, and then we can start duplicating it and rotating it around here. And once we've got a few of them, we'll group those together and get a lot more done with each copy paste. And there we go, that's that filled in. And we'll also use our upside down bushes trick to get some really nice looking plant growth on the cliffs themselves. And this will all surround the aviary viewing where the guests are going to come into here. We will turn that into a proper looking building a bit later on, but we'll get the walls finished first. So once we've used quite a few of the different boulder and rock pieces to make a really interesting looking cliff face at the front, what we're going to do is create a little arrangement of 2 rocks that forms a really solid block. And then we're just going to copy that around the whole aviary, which along with all the plants we're going to put on it and the plants that we're going to plant in front of it is going to look really nice and really natural. We'll place those in pretty roughly at the moment, just so they follow the circle around the side of the dome. And once we've got it all filled in, we'll tidy them up, add some more plants in, and there we go. That is what our aviary is looking like at the moment. Let's get on to the final stage of this build, which is adding a proper entrance to the building. For the entrance to the viewing gallery, I want to create something that combines the mainly wood-based architecture that we've been using throughout this park with something striking that projects forward towards the guests as they walk up to it and isn't just kind of covering up the basic piece that's already there. I want to get a bit more adventurous with this. So we're going to use these wood trim pieces that I really like with the curved ends to create kind of legs for the structure. And then we'll use some of these trellis pieces to create a roof. And we'll have 4 legs. We're going to make this a little bit bigger later as we get the scale of it correct. And then we're going to take one of the awning pieces and use this as a second part of the roof that's completely covered. And this is going to project backwards into the cliff face that we built and just provide some real interest to this entrance and get away from the kind of basic look that the game gives us. We're going to be using a lot of wooden logs here to create more texture and dimensions to the basic building that's here. Basically just using the same piece really, but scaling it and cloning it so we can get more solid planks where we want them and thinner ones where we want them. And by the time that we're finished, the only part of the viewing gallery you're going to be able to see are some of the concrete blocks at the top, which I've currently coloured to match the cliff walls. Later on I'm going to recolor those to match the brown of the wood that we're using everywhere else. And what we'll end up with is a completely wooden and bamboo entrance building, which with all the wood projections that we've added to the front, the rocks on either side, and the signage that we'll add in is going to look really unique. And then for the main material for the walls, we're going to use bamboo. I'm a big fan of the kind of smoked bamboo look, and because these are FlexiColor, we can do that here. So we'll have some bamboo panels on the front, finish up all the wooden pieces that we're adding in, and then we're going to have a sloped glass area at the top in between the roof and the walls, just to give another angle and another texture and yet more dimension to this building. I've complained a few times about the lack of genuine glass pieces in the game, but the basic glass pieces like this can be really useful because they enable you to make what looks like an interior and get a really smooth look, which completely covers up all that foliage that's poking down into where the building is, so we can no longer see that and everything looks really clean. Once we've got all of these glass pieces in to form one line across this part of the building here, we can move on to the final stage of the build, which is signage and a few more details. That's the glass in, let's move on to the signage. What we've got here is just a basic text saying Dimorphodon. We're going to copy it behind itself and then change the color of the new copy so it's darker. And then we're going to copy that behind itself multiple times to get the text to look like it's 3-dimensional. There we go. And then we're going to place the support poles in appropriate points along the front of the letters. I've shrunk them as small as they go so they're an appropriate size, and then we'll just move them back behind the letters, and now we have a sign that's actually fixed on to the building. All we need to do now is add some roots growing down this cliff face. We don't have any root pieces, so I'm going to use this dead tree here, which has got some really interesting gnarly shapes on it. And that is our Dimorphodon dome complete. Let's check it out. Here they come. These guys are so scary looking. Soaring majestically into their jungle. I absolutely love how this looks. I was hoping with all the trees in here with collision turned on, they wouldn't fly as much, but they still spend quite a lot of time flying. The dome is so high, it would be very tricky to fill it completely with trees, and it would ruin the look of the jungle floor. but when they are on the floor, they look really good. And the amount of trees does restrict their flying somewhat. And from outside, I am very happy with how this looks, the way you can see them flapping about in there. And it's so lush with all the trees that fill it as well. And there we go, that's the Dimorphodon Dome. I really hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you again next week for some more Jurassic World Northwest. Thanks for watching.